Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about my personal perspective as a Star Wars fan. I've been watching Star Wars reaction videos on YouTube. Newcomers who were born like 20 years ago or something, who are just watching them for the first time and reacting to them, which is fun, especially these younger generations. I have so much wanted to share what it was like, and to be watching these movies in the movie theater at the time in the late 70s, early 80s. I can only speak really about the early 80s. Um, and a number of the reactors on YouTube, they're at the ends of their videos, they've said it must have been wonderful to be able to see this on a big screen, and they wish that they had been able to do that and so forth. Well, there's no time machine, but I can describe from my personal perspective what it was like. It was an exciting time. 1983, when I saw Return of the Jedi, that may have been the first film I had seen in a movie theater. It's the earliest one I can recall, anyway, in a movie theater. I had seen Sound of Music and Wizard of Oz and so forth on TV, the Muppet Show, the Muppet movie on TV. But I think The Return of the Jedi is the earliest. Anyway, I don't want to repeat myself. That was 1983, and I've written a timeline here and filled with all sorts of references to the movie posters and the toys and the Play-Doh and the cereal even, Kellogg's cereal and the Burger King promotional glasses and so forth. I'm going to insert, this video will come out a little bit later than I usually have. I try to put up my videos Saturday or Sunday. This will probably be up Monday to give me time. I'm recording this Sunday, but I want to allow for editing in wonderful shots. Now, I have refrained from putting in, first of all, I don't have a lot of money to be able to put into a production like this. Excuse me. Secondly, I am wary of putting in any video that may get my whole video, I'm wary of putting in any video from another thing, like, for example, like a video of a Star Wars trailer, a commercial trailer or anything. In these videos, in general, I'm wary of putting in anything that might get the video copy struck, stricken. So anyway, but with this, I will put in still shots, a lot of still shots. All right, so let's get on to it. All right, so, I should give you my age. I was born November 14, 1975, to give you a sense. All right, I hope it doesn't dox me or anything. All right, so 1982, two movies came out which featured kids, both worked on by Steven Spielberg, who's a friend of George Lucas, who created Star Wars. Two movies came out in 1982 that featured, well, not featured, but had kids with Star Wars action figures or posters. And if you want to see a pretty good demonstration of what a boy's room would have looked like, check out E.T. the Extraterrestrial, which sounds kind of redundant because extraterrestrial shortened becomes E.T., but E.T. and Poltergeist. All right, that's in 1982. Now, 1983, May 25th, Return of the Jedi comes out in theaters, and it lasts in theaters for, I've looked this up because I wanted to see, from my own perspective, my own life, when certain things came out, to place them, in a timeline order. And Wikipedia, I believe that was, said it was out for 135 weeks in theaters. This dollar amount may not mean as much now, well, wouldn't mean as much now, but consider this in 1983 dollars. It grossed $775 million in 1983. It was out in the theaters for 135 weeks. Now that would be 2.59 years. I don't know how they, I sort of want to say, I don't know how they calculate that, but there must have been second run theaters in there somewhere. But that just goes to show how popular this movie is. And the first movie, nobody expected it, from what I've heard, nobody expected it to be as big as it was, but it just stayed in theaters throughout the summer and just kept running and running and running and running. Now, I'm going to watch this whole video I'm making and insert various shots. I want to show you the movie poster. This is the movie poster. Alongside that, when there was a TV series called At the Movies. It was hosted by two movie critics who had a show. At first it was called, I believe, Sneak Previews, and then it changed to At the Movies, and eventually Siskel and Ebert, and then eventually it went through titles after that. But so it just goes to show you how long this show had been on the air. There were just two movie critics sitting alone. There's a stage sort of thing. There's I guess a fake movie theater set behind them, and they're just sitting in two front row seats in a movie theater, and they watch a clip, and then they discuss various things they liked and disliked. They discuss the movie, not just the clip, but the entire movie. And it's very educational. You can go on YouTube and check those clips out. I almost want to have those clips shown. When you buy a DVD, I would like those clips to be inserted, like for a particular movie, to be included as special features in the DVD. That would be kind of nice. There's all sorts of rights issues, I'm sure. But all right. So when I may continue to say Star Trek. Forgive me. I'm a fan of both. No disrespect intended. When Return of the Jedi came out, it was a weekly series, so they devoted an entire episode to talking about what they liked about and what made those three movies, Star Wars, and then Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, so memorable and so groundbreaking. And then the following week, according to the end of that episode, they said they were going to review the new movie, Return of the Jedi. So I figured that would have been around May 25th. All right. Then alongside that, there were promotional things. There was a set of 4 Burger King glasses. Now, you could get one glass per week. And you would typically get it with a Coca-Cola soda. I believe I have all 4, not cracked or whatever. I also have a Peanuts glass collection. I'm not selling them. I'm keeping them forever, till the day I die, or till the day I non-exist, at least physically. So you can look those up. So Burger King glasses. And then Topps trading cards. This may be a thing of the past, but when a movie would come out, even a TV show, you would have trading cards, and it's basically akin to baseball cards, about the right size. They would come in a pack of like 5 or 10 cards in a pack, and usually have a rectangular stick of bubble gum. And people have made jokes about how dry the bubble gum was. It wasn't really that. It didn't come in strawberry and grape or something. It was vanilla. Not vanilla. It was like bubblegum flavor. It's just artificial bubblegum flavor. It was very dry, usually, because imagine it's packed in and just sits in comic book shops or store shops or whatever for who knows how long. I'd like to do a chemical test on bubblegum. So I remember having one for Gremlins. I tried to get the whole set. And these, you would get a pack of like 10 cards or something, and there would be a complete set. And the 1980s was I don't know about the 70s, but the 1980s was certainly an era of collect them all. there would be like 100 and something cards in a complete set. And of course, you'd have to buy the cards. You wouldn't know what cards were in each pack. So you'd just have to keep buying them, and hopefully you can find someone else who has a card in good condition or hopefully excellent condition that you can trade your duplicates, because inevitably you would get the same card again and again. So you get duplicates of the same cards you've bought. So hopefully you can find someone else to trade with. And there are also it's something I should have done, but I just had cards in open air, and same thing with my comic books. I just read them. I didn't think of preserving them in pristine plastic bags, I guess. Now I have plastic bags. Now I have more pristine card books. But anyway, you would hope that. Well, anyway, that's what I should have done. All right, so I had Gremlins. I had around 1984, 85. They came. I know I'm jumping ahead, but they had Transformers of the first episodes of the animated series, the first season of the animated series. Collector's cards for the Transformers action cards, and I had the Gremlins cards. I had Garbage Pail Kids, which was a humor, a satire, a parody, if you will, on Cabbage Patch Dolls. And there were other cards. I wasn't really a baseball card collector because I wasn't really interested in sports. But movies, oh wow, I had a passion, as you can tell. So I don't think I was collecting cards really. They were tops. I don't think I was collecting the Return of the Jedi cards at this time. I think a little bit later. I do remember buying cards because I do remember the package art. Now, what would you get in a Return of the Jedi package? There was a total of 220 cards and 55 stickers. Each pack would contain 10 cards, 1 sticker, and 1 stick of bubble gum that you could chew at your own risk. Okay. And some people would put the cards in the spokes of their wheels to make that nice sound. I don't know how many people did. Did you do stuff like that? Ruin your cards in for future years. Anyway, there was that. There was also an Atari, and I say timeline because I was using my own memoir, my own biography, to place what I was doing at this time, because this is from the perspective of a kid. I remember going to the mall, the shopping mall. It was Seneca Mall. Maybe I'm not doxing myself that much by mentioning Seneca Mall. And there was an arcade there, and it was you may have seen stand-up cabinet arcade platforms where you stand up and you have controllers. Well, this one was a sit-down arcade platform where I don't know how to describe. You basically, if you're looking at it from the side, you have a little space cut out for you to climb into and sit down, and then you're looking at the screen. And usually in these things, it's geared toward a racing game, something that would be taking advantage of the fact that you're sitting down. It could be a racing game or a car game or something. Well, here you had a controller, sort of had two side. I think it had two side things. It was like an H shape, and you would hold it and you would steer it like this, if I remember correctly. I don't think it was a joystick. And this was in 1983. It was by Atari, but it was of the original Star Wars movie. It was based on the original Star Wars movie. And it had actual sound effects from the first Star Wars movie. You are in an X-Wing fighter. You don't see yourself. You're just looking out from the cockpit of an X-Wing fighter, and you're approaching Death Star, and there's a trench run and so forth. It's an awesome game. Not much, clearly primitive by today's standards, hugely primitive by today's standards. But imagine at the time being able to maneuver through a trench run in the early 80s in an arcade game with sound effects and voices. I remember at one point you hear Luke Skywalker's voice say, "Oh no, I've lost R2," and you hear R2's and then you hear, "Oh no, I've lost R2," and then the laser blasts, and at the end when you strike the target, you hear Han Solo's voice say, "You're all clear, kid. Now let's blow this thing and get home." Um, I think that's about the point when you're right about to strike at the target, and then it shows you zoom away, zoom through, and then it shows, pixelated. It shows the Death Star blowing up, which is fun, and I remember that. I don't want to go on with that, but it gives you a taste. Alongside that, there was oodles and oodles of memorabilia, and this is the main point I wanted to get at with this video. I wanted to just go through all the memorabilia because I don't think they do that really with movies now, but this shows you how big Star Wars was. I remember I had MPC model kits, MPC model kits, and I treated them as like action figures. I didn't roughhouse with them, but I treated them as like large action figures. I treated my small action figures as models, basically, looking at them, their design. You glue them together, and I remember I had C-3PO, I had R2-D2. I probably had the X-wing X-wing fighter, and there were several others I just don't remember offhand. But there were model kits. There was a storybook that featured, on the cover, it featured Luke Skywalker with green lightsaber, and he was on a skiff. And I want to put in here, of course, shots of, insert here shots of the stuff I'm talking about. There was a Play-Doh set of Return of the Jedi. I had this one. It was Jabba the Hutt, and you had little molds. I think two-sided, like halved molds. You put the Play-Doh in, and then you clamp it shut. And what I did was, I probably hurt the molds a little bit, but of course I used Play-Doh, but I also took, I think it was plaster of Paris, some kind of more permanent solution stuff, and I poured it in, and I sealed it, and I opened it, and I made some figurines. That was nice. There was a coloring book I had. This one is the one. Sorry, the coloring book was the one with Luke in Jedi Knight, black Jedi Knight outfit with a green lightsaber. And let me see. The Star Wars Book of Masks, Return of the Jedi, Star Wars Book of Masks. As you see here, it's pretty evident. You just cut out or simply separate out the mask, and you can wear it on your face and tie a piece of string around. And there was a book, I think I have a copy of this, Return of the Jedi, Ewoks Join the Fight. And come to think of it, I may have bought this at a bookstore in school. Usually there would be, there was a bookstore, and usually at lunchtime or when you had free time, you could go down, and this is in elementary school, of course. You could go down and buy, for a little bit of money, you could buy these books. And I believe this is where I got the activity and coloring book for Supergirl. That would have been 1984. And this is where I may have gotten this book as well. Now, when you go into a toy store, what would you see at the time in those years? And I say years, multiple. From 1983 to about 1985, what would you have seen? Well, I know there are several versions of the lightsaber toy that came out, but the one that I always remember was a long lightsaber. Had a black handle, and there were stickers on it to indicate, circuitry or whatever, or control knobs, basically control knobs, and then just a long plastic. The whole thing was plastic. Long plastic cylinder. There was a green one, I remember, and there was a red one. I don't remember a yellow one necessarily. There could be a yellow one, Be interesting if there were a blue one, but I strongly remember the green and the red. That should make sense because those are the ones in Return of the Jedi. You walking in, there would be aisles. Now, what else would be sold in toy stores at this time? Toy stores were huge, especially in malls. There would be a whole aisle of Kenner's Superpower. Now, well, that would come a little bit later. You would have seen G.I. Joe action figures on card. On card, meaning obviously there would be a card maybe about this wide, these dimensions, something like that, and there would be a little hole punch, and it would be on a rack, and there'd be the figure would be standing up. There would be a plastic bubble, I would call it, a transparent bubble, in like the lower left corner, and there'd be artwork, probably some kind of artwork or photo of the character. And this wasn't just Star Wars. This was G.I. Joe. This was whatever TV related or movie related figures were being sold. And there were the oodles of like G.I. I can't think of the others really. I don't want to say ones that didn't exist at the time. I'll say later on what toy lines came out, but Star Wars and whatever else there was, just racks and racks of them. And on the back you may see a description, or more like a collection, like photos of images of all the ones in the set. Collect them all. So that's what you would see. You'd see the lightsabers. Now in a different area, I remember I had the Return of the Jedi lunchbox, which is here. Insert shot here. It had Luke Skywalker in a very heroic pose. Luke Skywalker was one of my first heroes, so to speak. Before that, I already had as heroes. I had Kermit to some degree. I identified with Kermit. Superman, certainly. The Christopher Reeve Superman from the movies. Those are my central heroes, I suppose. Kermit and Superman and Luke Skywalker. Okay, back to the lunchbox. Heroic pose with the pistol, and inside I remember having, I still have it, I had the red thermos, plastic thermos with an Ewok on it with R2-D2. Now, I don't know if they even sell lunchboxes anymore, whatever, but here's what the experience would have been. I wasn't alone. The typical experience of a boy in elementary school would have been a plastic lunchbox with a latch. You open it up, there would be a lid, and it would be basically a box that you would open like that. There would be typically a plastic thermos. You unscrew the cap, and you'd have your favorite drink, and you take it to school. And it was a way of showing off. You'd have Cabbage Patch Kids. I'm just making this up, but it's sort of based on what I remember. Cabbage Patch Kids lunchbox, I probably remember. Transformers. I had a Transformers one later on in elementary school. Cabbage Patch, Transformers. They even had like probably sports. I remember like an emergency 911 lunchbox, I think. And all sorts of lunchboxes. Like you name it, they had a lunchbox with artwork on it. And then you can imagine all these boys all lined up at the cafeteria, the lunch table, and they would all be chatting and so forth. And I was just curious sometimes looking around, and I would see who had what lunchbox artwork. It was like an indicator. It was like now they have Facebook, and you put artwork of things that you like. In some sense, then you had lunchboxes, and you could show off what your favorite movie was or some TV show. All right, so the lunchbox, and then alongside that, I remember my mom getting a tin. This one I had plastic, but there was an earlier tin lunchbox for Empire Strikes Back, and it had on the cover, on the front of it, it had the Han Solo and the other characters sitting in the Millennium Falcon cockpit. But that my mom got at a garage sale. Going back to the Kenner action figures, I should talk about I think I'm pretty much done with this. Oh, I should also mention I had a plastic, a hard plastic, um, Emperor's Imperial Royal Guard red pencil top. I don't know why it covers up the eraser. Again, it wasn't an eraser. It was a plastic, hard plastic thing. It was just decoration you stick on top of the pencil. And kids had those just for decoration. I mean, there were some that I suppose were erasers, but there were also ones that you just stick on top of, right over the number two pencil eraser, the eraser of the number two pencil. You just stick on top of it, and so I had what this one was the helmet, the red helmet of an Imperial Guard, Royal Guard, and I probably still have it somewhere. And I remember in Halloween in elementary school, it was either 1983 or 1984, probably 83. Classrooms would have their kids at a certain time, close to Halloween. Classrooms would have their kids line up, and the kids were encouraged to come to school dressed up in Halloween costumes. I wish we could do that more often. Um, but they would line up, and then they would go through the rounds, from this room to this room to this room it's like a parade, and they would visit each other's classrooms. It was really nice. I wish schools in general would do stuff like that more often. I don't know what they're doing now. I guess they're all behind computers and laptops or whatever, but it was really nice. So I made my own costume. I I like Luke Skywalker, and for me it was Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker because of Return of the Jedi. So I wore a black shirt, long sleeve, and I wore black pants, like black, not jeans, but carefully not jeans, but just black slacks probably. And the black shirt went under my belt, like kind of almost more like a skirt. Just it draped down towards my legs, and I had a belt around it, and I had a flashlight stuck in the belt, as kids would have. You hold the flashlight. It's pretty obvious for a kid, for a boy to figure out to put the flashlight in with the belt, holding it at your waist, fastening it to your waist. So I came in with that, and at one point up ahead, or maybe behind, probably up ahead, there was a boy I assumed a boy, but a kid dressed up in a Darth Vader costume. Now, there were Darth Vader Halloween costumes with the helmet and the suit. Nowadays, of course, there's a whole stormtrooper costume you can buy, and there's a biker scout costume you can buy. I don't remember any of that. I do remember the Darth Vader Halloween costume. So that I can vouch for from personal experience. I saw it at the time. It existed at the time. Then there were also activity books. I hope I still have these. I should. Now to preface that, I had other activity books. My mom really encouraged me by buying to draw. I prided myself on drawing. I just love to draw. She got me a book. It's like magazine size. How to draw comic book or comic hero superheroes, something like that. And it had Batman and Robin and Superman and so forth. And I'm sure I traced them, but it showed you how to draw from scratch, draw these figures from scratch. And I had other books, drawing books. In fact, I had one book when I was living in Winnipeg before a year or something before this. There was a more adult book, and it was geared toward how to use not finger paints, but more like how to use more adult, more artistic painting, tools like graphite comes to mind. It's not graphite, but like chalk. How to use like chalk and really, really complicated stuff. And in the back, of course, it had nudes. And my mom taped the back, did something like tape the back of it with the nudes so I wouldn't see them. So she was a little protective in that way. But she encouraged me in drawing. And so, okay, so the activity books. I don't remember exactly when this was in my life, but there were 6 different ones, each with a different cover and color as well. There was a monster one, which had Jabba the Hutt on it. There was one titled Mazes, had Lando in the Millennium Falcon, and Dot to Dot, which had Wicket, the Ewok, on it. Word Puzzle, which had Leia and Wicket on Endor, and had there was one called Picture Puzzle, had C-3PO and R2-D2, and I remember looking at the picture, the photo of R2-D2 and C-3PO, and wondering how did the actor fit into that C-3PO costume. I still, to this day, it's remarkable how he could fit. Anthony Daniels could have fit in there. And finally, Things to Do and Make with Luke on Endor. I believe he has a lightsaber. Came out those 6, and I have all 6. I hope I still have all 6, but I remember having all 6. All right, so in terms of action figures, I might as well go to action figures, Kenner action figures. All right, so the action figures came out in 1978, and there's a famous promo thing when the first figures came out, and there's people have talked about how the early bird special, they couldn't produce the figures in time for the first movie, but kids could buy. It was really clever. It really saved the skins of Kenner. You could buy essentially a promissory note. At the store, you could buy a promissory note that if you mailed it in, you will get, when the action figures are ready to be shipped, when they're produced and ready, they will be shipped to you. So, sorry, back scratches. That was really skillful. Okay, so now we came out a little bit before Empire Strikes Back, and then during Empire Strikes Back, you had I think 2 series of action figure lines covering Empire Strikes Back, and a little bit also of the ones that characters that they couldn't make action figures of for Star Wars. And then Return of the Jedi came out, and you had a whole new line for Return of the Jedi. But what's really neat is that they did not discontinue the earlier action figures. It was just accumulating and accumulating, so that on the back, remember I said action figures tended to have, on the backs of the cards, they tended to have collect them all, and you would see images of the different action figures available in the set. Well, Star Wars started off with like 12 or something. Somebody knows. Something like 12 originally, and then it became like 20, and then 50, and then 77, and then 100. And I think by the time, I'm jumping a little bit ahead of myself, like 1985 or something, when it ended in 1985 with Power of the Force line. By that point, it was like 100 and something action figures, not including all the play sets and the vehicles, like the Millennium Falcon and so forth, Millennium Falcon and the shuttle, and who knows, Dagobah play set, and so all sorts of things. Just the action figures alone, it's like 100 and something action figures. Anyway, in toy stores, you would see racks of them, and when I say racks, I don't mean just one metallic hook jutting out from the wall, and then you have a few figures. No. There's like several columns, each column having a metallic post going, metallic posts, several metallic posts going down in the column, and then you have several columns. And that would just be devoted to Star Wars. And then each metallic rod would have cards hung one behind the other. So you'd have one behind the other on each rod, and then several rods going down a column, and then hopefully several columns going across. So that would just be devoted to Star Wars, and then you'd have another one just devoted to Visionaries or something, and then another one devoted to GI Joe, another one devoted to later would be Transformers, a whole set, a whole box area, a whole set where you'd have boxes stacked up of Transformers figures and so forth. It was wonderful. To a little kid, that was wonderful. So that's what you would see. Kenner came out with these action figures, and you'd see not only the action figures, but you, as I said before, you'd have boxes stacked up of the play sets, the small play sets, the large play sets, the Millennium Falcon. There were two collector's case, at least. Well, actually, there were several collector's cases. By the time Return of the Jedi came out, you had a Darth Vader collector's case where it would be a flattened Darth Vader from chest up that you open like this, and then this is the craftsmanship that they had. You open it up, and then on each half there would be little cells, little spaces, alcoves, where you would stick the action figure in, and then there would be a horizontal bar for the name, where the name of the figure would be displayed. And they had two of those. They had Darth Vader one, and then they came out with the C-3PO one, where it was chest up, and operated the same way. And then before that, you had a bandolier like Chewbacca had. You could wear around, shoulder to waist, strap around. And then same idea, you had little alcoves in that where you could stick action figures. And there was also a rifle. I think that opened, I'm pretty sure that opened up, and the same idea, you had action figures you could put in that. You had the huge Millennium Falcon, you had TIE X-Wing fighters, you had TIE fighters, TIE interceptors, A-Wings, and miniature like sets of Cloud City and Dagobah. And just imagine this in the toy store alongside the action figures themselves. Wonderful. All right, so I want to get to these other things. All right, so going in the timeline on TV, November 21st, 1983, on CBS, you had a documentary called Classic Creatures. It was a 49-minute documentary. Being CBS, there would be commercial breaks. And now keep in mind, you didn't have the internet. The internet did not exist. You didn't have YouTube. You didn't have all sorts of sources of information. The only real source of information, other than a documentary, a one-time documentary on TV about special effects or the making of a movie, was perhaps a magazine that would devote an article to it. There were magazines. I remember I had a Dynamite. That was the title of the magazine series. I had an issue of Dynamite that was an interview with George Lucas. And I remember a photo in there that had Princess Leia a shot from Return of the Jedi, where Princess Leia is on Endor and she has her hand over C-3PO's mouth. And it was an interview. At one point, I think George Lucas was discussing whether he would be making further Star Wars films. He sometimes talked about plans to do a following 6 films. Eventually, these films were released, or I should say, eventually 6 films were released. Eventually, the first 3 films, the prequel movies in the trilogy, were released. And then he had plans to do a sequel trilogy, but that doesn't really bear relation to what Disney did with the sequel trilogy. In other words, George Lucas had his own plan, but when 2012, when Disney bought the rights to Lucasfilm and Star Wars, the flagship of Lucasfilm, Lucas had his ideas for what to do in a sequel trilogy, but Disney bought it and they went their own direction with it, and for whatever it's worth, for good or for bad. So, uh, right. So, okay. So, you didn't have very much to learn about how special effects were made, and being a motion picture enthusiast, a film enthusiast, I associated with it's very much like film is very much like dreams and magic, and I was fascinated by fantasy films. Like, for example, let's see, off the top of my head, I can't think of any films in the movie theater I had seen in 1983. In 1984, I can just reel them off. I remember Gremlins. I was a big Steven Spielberg fan, but Gremlin, I just gravitated to his films. 1984, the year 1984, it was Gremlins. 2010, the year we made contact. I remember seeing a little bit late, a couple years later, I saw Return to Oz, which I enjoyed. I enjoyed as being closer to the original books of L. Frank Baum. I wasn't really a fan of Wizard of Oz. I know there's a huge fandom that loves the 1938 or 39 film. I can't remember what year. 1938 or 39 film with Judy Garland. It's okay, and I would watch it when it was on, around the holiday season. But when this came out, it was not necessarily that it was dark necessarily, but it was dramatic and it did it seriously. It didn't have music and people. It wasn't a musical. It was a movie in the style of what felt authentic. It just felt authentic. Gremlins, Return to Oz, 2010, the year we made contact, Supergirl. I had already seen Superman films, so I was already interested. I was already attracted to fantasy, and not so much science fiction, but just there's an overlap between science fiction and fantasy. Those kinds of movies. All right. So anyway, so they would have lots of special effects, and how do you do it? And I remember a Muppet show. Well, I'm going to get into that, how they did the Muppet movies special effects too. So, but think of this. This is before CGI. This was at a time when you really had to do what's called now practical effects. At the time, it was just simply special effects. How could you get Kermit to actually ride a bicycle without any, evidence of puppetry? You really had to be ingenious. You really had to figure out. You really had to just be ingenious and figure out. Be magicians. That's a term I was looking for. You really had to be magicians in order to figure out how to pull off these illusions. They really were essentially filmed stage illusions. So anyway, going back to this, November 21st, 1983, CBS, Classic Creatures. It was a 49-minute documentary, and it had interview clips with George Lucas, and it may have been this or the next documentary. One of those he mentions, and they show sketches. He mentions how he, the various incarnations he had, the various ideas he went through before creating the classic characters that we had. Excuse me, my nose itches there. And he just various sketches. And at one point, he had Han Solo, an idea of him being a lizard creature, I think, or some kind of alien, more alien-looking creature, and just went through various iterations before finally coming upon the movie that we all know and love, 1977 movie. And that was an interesting look into his own workings, his own mind, and the evolution of the movie. And they showed special effects. They showed the puppetry involved. I'm sure they showed, that was the one where they showed Jabba the Hutt, and you had several different people inside Jabba the Hutt manipulating somebody doing the eyes, somebody manipulating the tail, somebody maneuvering the mouth, so forth. And all sorts of special effects. Again, keep in mind, you didn't have the internet. You just had magazines, which may have a little blurb or one article somewhere in some magazine somewhere that you may find in a library interlibrary loan to be able to find it. And I remember this as airing several times. I certainly audio recorded it. I did not have a VCR at the time. So that was November 21st, 1983, CBS, 49 minutes, classic creatures. And then December 3rd, 1983, PBS, from Star Wars to Jedi, 65 minutes. And of course, that was PBS, it was Public Broadcasting System, which meant that it did not have, it wasn't commercialized. It was not a commercialized network. So they didn't have as many commercial breaks. They really didn't have any commercial break. They didn't have any commercial breaks that we would understand or take in terms of commercials. Just went through like a short film. And then in 1984, you had the arcade game. Sorry, I skipped ahead a little bit, I guess. Remember that Star Wars trench runs, Death Star trench run? That came out in 1984, the arcade game. Also in 1984, you had C-3PO cereal. It looked like this. Hopefully I can find the inserted in here. They had cutout masks and sticker cards, and I remember eating this lots and lots of times. Of course, I was also eating S'mores Crunch cereal and a whole bunch of sugary cereals. I was drinking the Slimer, Ghostbusters, Ecto Cooler, the High C Ecto Cooler. I mean, like, my body put up with all this sugar and high fructose corn syrup somehow, some way, and I'm still alive. So it came out in 1984 and it was discontinued in 1986. Now, the reference that I found on the internet was, strangely enough, it just said discontinued in 1986 due to Challenger explosion, which was in January, I think it was like January 28th, end of January 1986. I don't know why it would be discontinued due to the Challenger explosion. I mean, that's a space shuttle. I guess space, I don't know. I had something to do with, I don't know how it would really do with C-3PO cereal other than it was space related. I don't know. Maybe my reference was incorrect. I mean, the reference thing I was referring to, the source was incorrect. Anyway, it was put out by Kellogg's Cereal. I should also mention, I neglected to mention that Pepperidge Farms. I remember going to the mall around the time, this is back in 83. This would have been back in 83, presumably. Went to the mall, and now that you know about these action figures, I can talk a little bit more about it. Went to the mall and with my mom several times to see the movie, Return of the Jedi movie. And one point I saw Pepperidge Farms selling Star Wars cookies. Somewhere, someone on the internet, I think, found the recipe and has been able to replicate those cookies. And I'd like to try that again. I remember a kiosk in the mall, in the hallway, where you would listen to some recordings, talking, hyping up the movie. I remember hearing, the one I heard was C-3PO talking about how he's telling R2-D2 and talking to R2-D2, but you only hear his voice. And he says how awful and fearsome the reputation of Jabba the Hutt, how fearsome Jabba the Hutt's reputation is, and being scared to meet him and so forth. All right, so jumping forward again, back to 1984, you had the Topps trading cards, Gremlins, Transformers, and that's why I jumped a little bit, because I remember collecting these in 84. I can put a date on it because Gremlins came out in 1984, but the collecting cards would have been before that, so that's why I introduced it earlier on. Now, in November 25th, 1984, on ABC, was the Ewok Adventure. Keep in mind, Return of the Jedi had come out in summer of 1980. We'll just call it the summer of 1983, and continued on, presumably because it was in theaters for 135 weeks. That was summer 1983. this is fall 1984. Um, on TV, they had a movie of the week, and this is a special, especially for a kid. This would be a big deal to have a movie of the week. There would be different networks. There's NBC, ABC, CBS, the primetime networks, and then of course you had cable, but that's a whole other issue. But this is when people were still focusing on prime time, the prime networks, ABC, CBS, and NBC. Um, there would be a movie of the week, and each network had its own 1 or 2 nights um, of the week each week. I can't remember what it was, but it was like I remember ABC Sunday night movie or NBC Tuesday evening movie or something, and they seemed to sort of partner with each other where they wouldn't have the same. NBC wouldn't necessarily have a Wednesday night movie if ABC also had a Wednesday night movie. They tried. It was a nice partnership. It seemed to be a coordination amongst the networks to not compete with each other in terms of time. But there may have been an overlap there somewhere. I sort of remember there being a little bit of an overlap. But anyway, November 25th on ABC in 1984, there was the Ewok Adventure. It has subsequently been called by a Caravan of Courage, I think, especially in foreign markets where it was shown in movie theaters. But I'm not going to mention that. I remember it as the Ewok Adventure. That's how it was in the United States. And so that just took place on Endor, of course, and it didn't have Luke Skywalker or whatever. Other characters came in for just that movie, but you saw the Ewoks, and that was the big deal. You got to see a whole new adventure, first of all, of Star Wars, and you got to see the Ewoks in their own natural habitat. Then in 1985, the Empire Strikes Back, in 1985, Atari released the Empire Strikes Back arcade. Again, it's a sitting platform, usually a sitting platform. I've seen it also as a standing platform, but it was the same idea where you're maneuvering around. This time you're in a snow speeder and you're maneuvering around these walking AT-ATs or AT-ATs. All right, fine. I'll please both sides of the Star Wars fandom, AT-ATs or AT-ATs. The Imperial Walkers, you're maneuvering around trying to strike them, and it's the same idea, and their sound effects and voices from the movie. And I believe in this one, it cuts from that. I may be mistaken. It may be in the Return of the Jedi one. One of these, I think it's the Return of the Jedi one only. It cuts from one scene to the next. It cuts from one scene to the next. Anyway, there was a arcade game, where it cuts from one to the next, and one of the ones it cuts to is on Endor, where you're on a speeder bike. It's from you're looking at it from an overhead bird's eye view, and you're on a speeder bike, and there are biker scouts on speeder bikes, and you're trying to knock them off, and they're trying to attack you, and so forth. And it cuts from that to, I believe, the Death Star from Run, the attack on the Death Star from Return of the Jedi. That would have been a separate movie. All right, so then 1985, not only did that come out, but Kenner had been releasing these Star Wars action figure sets, Star Wars action figures, and they had run out of a new movie. There was no new movie after Return of the Jedi to base new action figures upon. So they continued to release earlier action, they continued to release action figures of earlier characters, but instead of having the banner be Star Wars or Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi, they called it the Power of the Force. Now, I should say that on the cards, I remember I said that they never discontinued a Star Trek action figure. Star Wars action figure. They would simply release the action figure on a new card, usually with a new photo of the figure person, the character, and then they would have a banner at the top with the latest movie. So in other words, hypothetically, you'd have Luke Skywalker in the original release, just after, well, before Empire Strikes Back came out. It was originally just Star Wars. It was the only movie existing. It would just on the top, the banner would say Star Wars, and it would have a picture of Luke on Tatooine, just a photo of him. And then when Empire Strikes Back came out, you would have the same action figure, same accessories and everything, but it would say Empire Strikes Back, it would say Luke Skywalker, and they would have a photo from Empire Strikes Back. I don't remember what photo they would have used. They might have even used. They probably used a photo in that instance. They probably used a photo from Star Wars. They probably even just used the same photo. They just changed the top to say Empire Strikes Back. I think Darth Vader is a better example where he kept the same design, the same look through the different movies. So you may have seen one photo of him during the original Star Wars release, and then for Empire Strikes Back, it would say Empire Strikes Back, and you may have seen a different photo. I don't remember exactly, but you may have seen a different photo from Empire Strikes Back. And then when Return of the Jedi came out, you would see the same action figure contained within the plastic bubble on a card that gave his name Darth Vader, and then it would say Return of the Jedi, and then it would show perhaps a different photo, one from Return of the Jedi. So explaining that. But they had run out of, the 3 movies had been released, but they were still continuing to produce action figures all the way through up until 1985, and it was the Power of the Force line. And there were also promotional mail-aways. I think the first promotional mail-away was for Boba Fett. Now, getting a little bit into specific Star Wars lore, but they came out with the Early Bird Special, which had Luke Skywalker, the basic characters from the original Star Wars movie, 1977. This is 1978, and there was a Star Wars Holiday Special about to come out around Thanksgiving time. People think Christmas. No, it was a holiday special, and it was around Thanksgiving. And you had different figures. You had what became known as Snaggletooth, Walrus Man, so forth. And one of them was Boba Fett. And that was perhaps the first mail-away figure. You collect a few proofs of purchase that were printed as part of the artwork on the card of the action figure you bought in the store, and for like $20. I'm kidding, not $20. No. I mean for some amount of money included with 2 or 3 proofs of purchase or something or other, meaning you proving you had bought these other figures in stores. You could send them away in the mail, and then you would get a figure. And the first one I believe was Boba Fett, and there's a whole history about how they had to remodel the rocket pack for Boba Fett and not make it able to launch that rocket. I won't go into that. Then the next series was and that was close to the release of Empire Strikes Back, and then at some point in the Empire Strikes Back, he eventually was available on card as part of the regular set you can buy in the store rather than mailing away for it. After Boba Fett, I don't remember who was in there. Forloom, I remember, was a mail-away figure for that, Empire Strikes Back. There were 2 series, first and second for Empire Strikes Back, and Forloom was one of the mail-away offers for one of them. I don't remember what the other one was. And then for Return of the Jedi, one of them was the Emperor. That was a big deal. The name Palpatine did not exist at that time. Well, it existed in novel adaptations, but in terms of the movies themselves, he was just simply known as the Emperor, which sort of makes it more intimidating. Like you don't know who this person is. He's just almost like he is God. You know, he is the emperor. That he was a male way figure, and then I believe it's a power of the. Oh no, Admiral Akbar, I believe was the first. Was the first. Okay, I hope I'm still recording here. Okay, Admiral Akbar was the first one in Return of the Jedi as a male way figure, and then came the Emperor, and then for the Power of the Force line after that was Anakin Skywalker, and that was a big deal. I'm just paranoid about this continuing to record. Good. Okay. And that was a big deal because you never saw you saw Darth Vader, but you never actually saw Anakin Skywalker. Spoiler alert, I guess, until you saw the end of Return of the Jedi, and then you saw even at the very end. Of course, his face has been plastered over by Hayden Christensen because of the prequel movies, but that was in the special editions. In the original release of Return of the Jedi, for a long time, up until for 15 years, until George Lucas put Hayden Christensen's face onto pasted it onto Sebastian Shaw's face. Up until that point, you just saw Sebastian Shaw, and I think that's a better performance. At the end of Return of the Jedi, in a ghost form, you see Ben Kenobi appear, Luke Skywalker. It's like everybody else is unaware. They're just partying with themselves, and it's a big celebration. We've won. The Empire is defeated. Luke Skywalker walks over, just looks off alone, quiet time, and he sees the ghost of Ben Kenobi, and then Yoda appears as a ghost, and then this third figure appears, and it's Sebastian Shaw, not in Darth Vader outfit that you'd seen previously in the minutes earlier, but in his robes, looking something like Obi-Wan Kenobi, and even now I'm sort of tearing up. He looks toward Darth Vader, and I mean, sorry. He smiles warmly, and he looks toward Obi-Wan Kenobi. He like nods. He smiles to Obi-Wan Kenobi, and then he looks directly at Luke, who is off camera, and he grins proudly. And I wish they did not paste Hayden Christensen's face over his, because it just destroys the mood. I don't think Hayden Christensen's face image that they used captures the same warm feeling at the time. I mean, if you watch the original 1977 movie, Obi-Wan Kenobi talks fondly about his close friend, Anakin Skywalker. I mean, he doesn't use the term Anakin Skywalker. He just says Luke's father, but he characterizes him as a good, dear friend and good pilot, and that's part of the tragedy of Anakin Skywalker becoming Darth Vader. So here, and then the final moment, almost the final moments of Return of the Jedi, Luke Skywalker takes the mask off, and you see Sebastian Shaw playing the part under the helmet, and you see the human face of Luke's. This is not the menacing Darth Vader. This is Luke's father, and so it's really nice. And Sebastian Shaw was a skilled actor and really played the part well. He looked, no dialogue whatsoever. He just looks toward Obi-Wan, like tilts his head towards Obi-Wan Kenobi, as I recall, as a nod. Didn't have to say a word, just as a sign of how he respected and how much of a friendship he shared with Obi-Wan Kenobi. And then he looks towards, like, directly. Of course, Luke is off camera, but he looks directly. It's clear he's looking directly at Luke Skywalker. And my qualm about the Hayden Christensen thing over his face is that Hayden Christensen, the face just doesn't match eye contact. There's no eye contact with Luke Skywalker. He just looks down and mildly kind of sheepishly looks up. It doesn't fit. And I can see in the original Sebastian Shaw performance, he's proud, he's grinning. And in that, I can sense that he is proud of what Luke Skywalker had become. And he succeeded where Luke Skywalker succeeded where he himself, Anakin Skywalker, had failed. And it just works. So that's the whole big other video, which I made before. So I won't repeat myself. So anyway, so the Power of the Force action figure line. So they finally came out with this Power of the Force, this action figure of Anakin Skywalker wearing robes, and it's not Darth Vader. It's finally Anakin Skywalker. So that was the mail away figure, I think, for the second, one of the two one of the two line releases for for the Power of the Force. All right, so now we're up to September 7, 1985, ABC. There's the Droids cartoon. Now, this is like, past 2 years now since the final movie of the trilogy. We're still pumping out Star Wars stuff. There was a half-hour Droids cartoon. 13 episodes were made. That's typical of a Saturday morning cartoon series. 13. That it would carry you basically from the fall to the end of the year, December, fall, like September to December, alongside the Droids cartoon, which starred C-3PO and R2-D2. I think Anthony Daniels, I was going to say Rick Baker, was it not Rick Baker? Whoever was, Kenny Baker, sorry Kenny. He didn't offer voices. He was in the costume of R2-D2, and he manipulated the R2-D2, but he didn't offer voices. Anyway, Anthony Daniels did the voice, I believe. I'm sure Anthony Daniels provided the voice for the cartoon of C-3PO as well as in the movies. And you had the E of R2-D2, and then you had cameos from IG-88, and you had stormtroopers and so forth, but it didn't have Luke Skywalker and the other characters. It was just R2-D2 and C-3PO. And alongside that, you had another cartoon, presumably, from what I remember, the two aired back to back. It was like 1 hour of droids, and I mean, like 1 hour. It had half an hour of droids, it had half an hour of Ewoks. And droids lasted only one season, but and that would have been September to December, and then for a second season, you had Ewoks, and I guess maybe there were 2 episodes. I don't know. I don't think it would have been a whole hour, but at least you had another season beyond droids and Ewoks of just Ewoks, and it took place on Endor and so forth. That was September 7th on ABC, and then November 24th on ABC, again, 1985, you had the second Ewoks movie of the week. It was on ABC, and I'm not sure if this was the original title. As I recall, it could have been. It's certainly since become Ewoks: The Battle for Endor. And then in September 13th, 1986, you had here Ewoks cartoon, 13 half-hour episodes. I guess that would mean that this would have been the second season. I guess you had droids. Now that I think about it, I guess there would have been other cartoons in that time slot later on in the beginning of 1986. So it was probably Droids cartoon and Ewoks for 13 weeks or 13 episodes from September to December. And then from December to May or June, something like that, you would have had some other cartoon. And then here, September 13th, 1986, which would have been a year later, I see here, I put down a second season of Ewoks, and it ran for 2 seasons, 13 episodes, and there was no droids. So I've been talking for quite a while. I hope I didn't go on too long. I also want to mention that I did have the Marvel comic book adaptation of Return of the Jedi. So hopefully that's informative. I do want to do another one like this about the history of Transformers, going all the way back to Japan and micro change and how it changed from something in Japan to what we know as Transformers in 1984, in 1986 in the movie. I want to go through a nice timeline. All right, so I'll talk to you next time. Bye.